Welcome to Unit 5 of OnlinePHPClass.com. And in this unit we're going to talk about include files and functions. So why do we want to talk about include files and functions? Well, sometimes we want to reuse the code that we create. Sometimes it's helpful if we can create projects down the line that reuse code that we've already created. Other times we want to reuse code in the same project, in different sections of it. We often want to call the same code several times, and sometimes we want to make our code easier to read. One way to do that is by using code that you've used before through functions and the like. We can then divide and conquer big problems into smaller, easy to read encode functions. I once developed a very complex Jabber bot about a computer that uses the Jabber XML client. And one way I did that was using PHP. I wrote a very complicated user authorization mechanism, and that used a lot of very small functions that, when combined, turned into a very huge function. There was one function that did all the authorization, and it relied on all of the smaller functions. It's much easier to take a really big task and turn it into small tasks, and then combine the smaller tasks. It's easier to read, especially when you get to name your functions based on what they do, and then all you have to do, you can do things where it just becomes very easy when you put it into control structures and the like. Anyway, let's move on. So first I want to talk about the include statement. Include takes the content of the file that is being included and evaluates it as if it were inserted into the calling script. So the example here is from php.net, and it's called vars.php. And all vars.php has is color equals green and fruit equals apple. Then there's another script called test.php. And in test.php you have two examples where you're echoing A and then the variable color and the variable fruit. And it shows you in the comments that the first one just results in echoing A. Then we include vars.php, and when you re-echo the exact same line, you get a green apple. The variables are as if we set them in test.php. Just to clarify, vars.php and test.php are two separate files, and in test.php, in this example, we are including vars.php. It's as if we took color equals green and fruit equals apple and put them inside of test.php right where the include statement is. Okay. Next we have the require statement. Now require works like include, except the script will actually be halted if the specified file cannot be found. Okay. Include allows the script to continue, so if the code inside your included file is required, use the require keyword instead of include. They function exactly the same, except require will halt the script if the include file is not there. That's helpful if you have code that's required. I mean, that's why it's called that, really. If you want to, one of the applications, actually several applications I write, use role-based authentication, and in those applications, the role check, rolecheck.php is my standard for things that check roles on my applications, and the rolecheck.php is required because if you can't verify the roles that a user has, I don't want the script to continue. I don't want the website to continue to function because it's really missing an important piece. So there's the difference between require and include. Now you also have include once and require once. Okay, if you don't want the code inside your included file to be included, if it were already included, you can use include once or require once. Okay, they function exactly the same as their counterparts, meaning include once functions like include and require once functions like require, except if the file you're going to include or require was already included or required, then by using that function, you're not going to re-include it or re-require it. So with PHP 4, PHP 4 is actually case sensitive for determining if the file was already included, and PHP 5 is case insensitive. Okay, and my note here says that this is particularly needed on non-Nix based servers, so non-Unix or Linux based servers. And the reason why is because in Windows the OS is case insensitive. However, bear in mind that if you are using PHP 4 on a Windows server, the case sensitivity still carries through as if you were running on a Nix-based server. Okay, Nix-based server, people who use them are familiar with case sensitivity in those particular types of operating systems. Okay, so one place where I use the once keywords is to include a file of database functions, because if that were included with each file, the functions would be redeclared, and functions can only be declared once in PHP. So basically, if I have multiple pages of a site, and if I'm including files, and those files, when included, also include the same database functions, I can't have nested files that are including the file before it. I can't have them define the same exact function names because PHP will only allow the functions to be declared once. So if you get something like cannot redeclare function as an error when you are writing your code, one reason for that is because you've included or required a file multiple times, either in the same file or you've included one that then included another, and somewhere down the line you're including the same file that has functions defined, and therefore PHP when parsing the entire script, that particular script, it'll say you cannot redeclare the functions. This is particularly helpful for me when I do headers, because I'll put in a header things like the role check, things like database connectivity, things like sessions, which we'll talk about in another unit. So those particular things in the header, and I want each page to include the header, because on a site where you have to log in, I don't want somebody to be able to hit a page that's on the secure side of the site, so to speak. I want, if the person does hit that page, I want them to be redirected to the login form. Okay, so one way I do that is through things like this. However, you may have include files that you may have include files down the line that rely on the same functions, so you want to be careful. One tip while I'm on the topic of include and require is you always want to name if you create files specifically for including, you may see some applications that end them in .inc for include. I strongly recommend, in fact, I pretty much require it, that you name them in you have a .php at the end. I don't care if you put .inc.php, okay, but you should have a .php at the end. And the reason why is because .inc as an extension on the file is not configured in the web server, more than likely, to actually be parsed. So what happens is people, if they know the name of the file, they can just type the name of the file into the web browser in your URL, and they can actually see the text. Because in particular with Apache, if the web server doesn't know the extension, doesn't know how to actually render it, it'll assume it's plain text. Okay, so software vendors, you got to be careful, because sometimes people will name it like db.inc, and they'll include the database credentials. Well, if anybody knows where that db.inc file is, they can just call it directly. Some people will protect that directory with an htaccess file, which we won't actually cover. If you want to know more about htaccess files, feel free to post in the forum. But basically, some people will protect directories like that, but you got to be careful, because Apache configurations can be told not to allow htaccess files either, in which case the vulnerability still exists. So the best way to get around it is to, if you're going to include a file like db.inc, if you're going to create a file like db.inc, call it db.inc.php. Then you know its purpose is for include, and PHP at the end means that the web server is always going to interpret it. even if all you have is a file of functions, okay, which is typically what include files are, if that's all their purpose is, okay. Functions may be variables. Basically, the files aren't going to echo anything, okay. So that's what I would recommend and pretty much require. I do that with all of my code. I always name my include files with a .php extension, okay. So now we'll move on to, I want to talk briefly about variable passing in terms of include files. And an important note is that variables in a parent file are accessible to the included file at the scope in which the include require statement was specified. So what this means is, to go back to the basics, it really is as if you took the code from the file you're including and placed it in the file you are calling the include file from, right in that particular spot, with the exception of the PHP tags. Okay. So, the top level PHP tags. Okay, if you have nested ones, you could still use them. Anyway, basically, you gotta keep scope in mind. If you have a variable called $name, and you then include a file right underneath $name, and you change it, okay, you're literally changing the variable in the original file. Okay, so let's say there's okay, and actually to the next bullet point, variables set or changed in the include file can affect the variables in the parent file, so watch your variable name. So let me go back to that original example, because here, if I actually did say set color equal to orange, okay, and then and then I actually went to continue, I would actually be manipulating the color. So one way is if I set in test.php, say the first line of test.php after the open PHP was color equal orange. Then I include vars.php. The next statement is going to say it's going to have color equal green. You literally changed the variable that you defined in the original file. Okay, so you want to be careful with that. You got to be careful with scope, and I'm going to show you another example of scope here. Okay, the scope example is coming a little bit down the line. I want to talk about functions first, because I talked about scope in the context of functions. Only briefly though, specifically from a PHP global perspective. Okay, first let's talk about functions. Functions are sections of code that can be called by the code. Okay, they isolate code so that you can call them. I like to think of them sometimes as my little helpers, in the sense where I can call the function to do a particular little task, and then I may have one function that relies on, so like there's a parent function or a main function or whatever that relies on those little functions. And I always say little in terms of lines of code. You can have one line of code that's very, very powerful. Okay, so you want to be I just mean in terms of lines of code. So for example, if I wanted to print all the numbers from 1 to 10, I could do this. I could create a function print 1 to 10, and then put a for loop inside. For I equals 1, do while I is less than or equal to 10, I plus plus, and echo I with a break. So, and then at the bottom, underneath that closing brace, I have print 1 to 10, which is the function call. You can put variables inside the parentheses in the function definition. So it could be function print 1 to 10, open paren, variables, close paren. And you can set default values for those variables and all sorts of cool things. So if I wanted to print 1 to 10 10 times, I could then do this. For I equals 0, do while I is less than 10, I plus plus, print 1 to 10. So now you have an example of the function print 1 to 10, which breaks down an easy to accomplish task, a for loop that prints 1 to 10. And then I'm using another for loop to call print 1 to 10. So in essence, I'm getting print 1 to 10 printed 10 times. And To put it all together, I mean, it's simple enough that you probably could put it all together and understand it pretty easily. However, you begin to see how as things get more complicated, using functions become even more helpful. So the code that prints numbers from 1 to 10 is then reusable. That is true also. I could take the function print 1 to 10, put it in any PHP file I want, and call it. Alright. Here's the syntax for writing functions. Alright. So you have function. Foo is function name in this example. Argument 1, argument 2, all the way up to argument n. Example function is what it's echoing, and it's returning ret val. In this particular example, I don't know why. So there's no actual ret val set. I don't know why PHP would be doing that, but you can return a particular value. So from php.net, any valid PHP code may appear inside a function, even other functions and class definitions. You can have nested functions. I don't think I've ever needed a nested function, but you can have them. Function names follow the same rules as other labels in PHP. A valid function name starts with a letter or underscore, followed by any number of letters, numbers, or underscores. It's the exact same rules as variable naming convention and that kind of thing. Alright, so to call a function, if a function is defined as the result of an if statement, it must be defined and processed before it is called. Otherwise, it doesn't have to be. You can call a function and define it later, okay, as long as it's in the same script, or even if you include it later in the script, it essentially parses as if it's in the same script. To call the function, just use the function name and place the variables inside parentheses. So here's an example, calling the function MySQL numRows, placing the variable query result inside of parentheses. You can assign the results to a variable. Here's an example, variable $num_rows equals MySQL_num_rows query result. So you're taking the number of rows in that query result and storing it in the variable numRows. Here's the global keyword. Consider this. You have con equals MySQL connect localhost user password. By the way, we will talk about MySQL in a later unit. This is the syntax for how to connect to a MySQL database. Localhost being the server, user being the username of the connection, and password being the password for the connection. Okay, function connect to DB, return MySQL select DB employees con. Okay, the syntax for MySQL select DB, which we'll talk about also in the MySQL unit. You're passing it a database. You don't have to pass it a connection result, however, or connection identifier rather. However, if you don't, it uses the last one that's defined. In this particular case, we're forcing the connection to be the $con. However, as my note says, con is not accessible to connected DB unless register globals is on in PHP any, which it is not recommended. So if register globals is off, which we purposefully have, then we must therefore make con available using the global keyword. And this is how we do it. So this would work. Con equals MySQL connect localhost user password. Function select DB name of DB. Then inside of that function, the first thing we do is global $con semicolon. Then the same exact return MySQL select DB, and in this particular case, name of DB $con. So I actually have, I don't think I did name of DB in the previous section. No, I didn't. So here I'm also showing you how to pass to utilize a variable passed to the function. And by using global con, basically goes out a level and says, okay, con is set to this particular connection. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Alright, demo time. Write a function that echoes my name to the screen, placing that function in an include file, and then including the file and calling the function one time and in a loop. Okay. Alright, so here we have, alright, here we have, where are we at? So write a function that echoes your name to the screen, placing the function in include file. Let's do that first. call it first. Make sure it works. Okay. Now it says placing in an include file. Well, let's see here. Okay, include file. Now, do I say how I want to call it? And including the file and calling the function one time. Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to take this out, so I'm not unit on functions. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll call it print my name. That's the result. In fact, what I'll do is I'll change this. Go here, hit internal preview. Alright. That's how you call it. And then in a loop. And I just like to indent for form. And it all goes across the screen because we didn't put a break. So you could do it two different ways. You could edit the include file. Okay, I'll do that second. Or you could do print my name. And see, this is what I'm talking about. If you do want to edit this, you got to put the braces back in, or in. So it's do it this way. Okay. Or, well, I'll leave that here because what I'll do then is I'll put it in the include file, and then I'll show you that it's actually going to double space it because it'll have two breaks. If I actually did a preview in the include file, nothing would show up because the include file doesn't actually echo anything. But then if I go to internal preview here, you get it. Alright, so that is the demo. Pretty straightforward. You can get an idea though how things start building, because you can do things. You can even do something like this. You can do echo hello, print my name. Okay, and then that's because there's a break in the actual include file. And actually, what am I echoing first? Oh, that's interesting. Why is it doing that? Echo, really? It's putting it at the end. Why would it do that? That is really weird. I have no idea why it's doing that. It's doing the echo first. Take this, I'm curious. If I take this break out, okay, it looks like it's printing this and then it's doing hello this, hello this, hello. But it's ending with hello. So, I mean, I don't, how did it do that? Hello, print my name. Oh, I do know why. Because the function is going to get evaluated first in terms of order of the operations. Because when you do assignments, you want the function to execute so that you can do an assignment. So in other words, if I did well, that I don't even know if that's going to set it. It should. So if I do it like this, here, I want to come back to this. Curious now what this does. Okay, that. So does the exact same thing. All right. If I didn't do the echo, okay, and I did a return, would that make a difference? Yes. Okay, so I think what's happening is the echo in the function is trumping. So when you call this function, it's saying, oh, I know what to do. I'm going to print onlinephpclass.com, and the function gets executed first. So then you print your echo hello occurs. Okay, it's kind of tricky. In order of operations, because in order for this assignment to occur, this function has to execute before the assignment operation. Okay, you have to get the result of print my name before you assign it to my underscore name. So when you call this function, the echo takes place. Then whatever else happens. So if you just had this line here, print my name, it would echo onlinephpclass.com, and then it would echo hello, and that's what you saw that it was doing. That's why it does that, because of the order that it needs to take place. So if you do a return, you are getting the value then returned from this function, assigned to this variable, then this variable gets resolved, and then the echo statement occurs. And that's why that works. So that's good that I actually did this. My intention was to show you how things start building. I can start putting your echo, wrapping it around results. You can now, you don't need the assignment. Now that you're using a return, you can now do hello print my name. Okay? It's not actually going to change. But if I change this to hi, you'll see that it is actually working. Okay? Because of the return. So be careful when you're doing your function definitions. I typically don't put echoes in my function unless the function is specifically designed to echo something. But be careful if you want to utilize it like this. And you can see how things start to build. All right. So with that, the exercise is to do the demo. So write a function that echoes your name to the screen, place that function in an include file, and then include the file and call the function one time, and then in a loop. You can go beyond that. You can utilize multiple loops, different types of loops, practice your loop structures. You can practice with nesting, include files inside of other include files, practice using require once, include once, practice using global. You can do all the things that we talked about here. You can take them and start building. I want to give you the opportunity to experiment and just have fun and find out those interesting things. So if you come across things like I just discovered or remembered in reality, the regarding the order of the operations of the execution of the functions and stuff like that, feel free to post in the forum. You can also post any questions as usual, or observations, or just things you want to share and that are related to the course. And yeah, and have fun. I mean, really start to utilize what it is that we've gone over thus far, and continue to build. Because as a assuming that you have some aspect of programming background, you can start to imagine how you can use these building blocks from PHP, from the LAMP stack, and begin to make sites and enhance sites that you already have that meet your needs, be it as simple as adding a dynamic piece to your website or completely creating a web application. All that is possible. And I hope you're getting a lot out of this course thus far. Thanks for staying with us, and I will see you in the next unit.